For this 4th thread stitch, you must set the seam width switch at S. For this 4th thread stitch, you must set the seam width switch at S. Ensure that the switch is pushed as far as it will go, thus ensuring that tidy seams are sewn. Use the adjustment wheel to set a stitch length of between 2 and 4. For an overview of the recommended thread tensions for various fabrics, please refer to the graphic. For the 3-thread chain stitch, you must set the seam width switch at S. Ensure that the switch is pushed as far as it will go, thus ensuring that tidy seams are sewn. For this stitch, you will need either the thread of the left needle, the upper and the lower loop thread, or the thread of the right needle with the upper and the lower looper thread. The 4th thread, which is not needed for this stitch, is to be unthreaded and the required 2nd needle removed. Set a stitch length of between 2 and 4. For an overview of the recommended thread tensions for this type of stitch, please refer to the graphic. For the 2-thread overcast chain stitch, you must set the seam width switch at S. Ensure that the switch is pushed as far as it will go, thus ensuring that tidy seams are sewn. For this stitch you will need the thread of the left or right needle, the looper thread plus the supplied upper looper element. The threads not needed for this stitch are to be unthreaded and the unrequired needle removed. Finally, insert the small wire of the looper element into the eyelet of the upper looper and the plastic bolt from the front into the hole in the upper looper. If you do not need to use the upper looper element, you can store it in the slot behind the front flap. Set a stitch length of between 2 and 4. For an overview of the recommended thread tensions for this type of stitch, please refer to the graphic. All other possible variants for overlock seams can be obtained from the printed manual. When sewing roll hemmings, the fabric edge is folded over and provided with an overlock seam. For this type of stitch, you will need the thread of the right needle plus the upper and the lower looper threads. First, take out the thread for the left needle and then remove the needle. For details of how you remove needles, see the section Inserting, Removing Needles. For the 3-thread rolled hem, you must set the seam width switch at R. Ensure that the switch is pushed as far as it will go, thus ensuring that tidy seams are sewn. Use the adjustment wheel to set a stitch length between F and 2. For an overview of the recommended thread tensions for this type of stitch, please refer to the graphic. All other possible variants for roll hemmings can be obtained from the printed manual. For the working of jersey, knits and other stretchy fabrics, it is necessary to use a gathered overlock seam, so that afterwards you achieve a smooth result. For this it is necessary that the differential transport is set to a value greater than 1.0. The exact setting depends, however, on the material to be worked. Therefore, always sew a test seam beforehand. The following procedure makes it easier for you to change the thread. Cut the yarn still in the machine above the spool supports and place the new rolls of thread on the spool supports. Tie the ends of the new and the old thread together. Place all of the thread tension selectors at 0 and lift the sewing foot using the sewing foot lever. Pull on the other end of the yarn until the knots pass under the sewing foot. For threading it in the needle, pull on the other end until the knot is in the eye of the needle. Cut the yarn to the left and right of the knot, then carry out the rethreading. The Silver Crest overlock machine has 2 sets of toothed rack feeders, which can move independently of each other and at different speeds. Using these, the fabric is stretched or gathered. With the aid of the differential transport, interesting effects can be achieved when sewing overlock seams on stretch materials and diagonally cut fabrics. The gathered overlock seam is suitable for the ruffling of sleeves, skirt seams and such like made of elastic materials such as knitwear and jersey. Please note that with this overlock seam, the individual parts should be brought together before sewing. Adjust the differential transport lever to a value higher than 1.0. The exact setting depends, however, on the material to be worked and the desired level of ruffling or gathering. Therefore, please always make a sample seam beforehand. The stretched overlock seam is suitable for wave and ruffle effects on decorative collars, cuffs and skirt edges and similar made from soft, stretchy fabric and knitwear. Adjust the differential transport lever to a value lower than 1.0. The exact setting, however, depends on the material to be worked and the desired level of frilling. Therefore, please always sew a sample seam beforehand. Hold the seam down with slight firmness before and behind the sewing foot so as to keep the textile under tension. To work tubular-shaped fabrics, such as sleeves or trouser legs, you can remove the free arm cover. If appropriate, remove the waste container from the machine. Slide the free arm cover to the left and then pull it off. You can now pull and work the textiles over the free arm. When you work with pins, always insert them to the left of the sewing foot. The pins will then not be a hindrance to the knife and they can be easily removed afterwards. Take note that you must never sew